Good afternoon, evening, everybody. As you're all probably aware, this is a Bar Council panel with the aim of answering some questions for you guys to give you some more information, tips, advice on how to approach and deal with pupillage interviews, which hopefully a good portion of you will be experiencing at some point in the next couple of months. The first thing that I'm going to do is to have the panel introduce themselves, and then I'll move on to what the structure of this session is going to be and how you might want to use it, and then we'll get into the advice. So my name is Jamie Jenkins, as you can see on the screen. I'm a barrister at St John's Buildings. I practice in employment, education, and discrimination law. It's a very strange niche practice. And I spend a fair amount of time doing things like this to try to shed a bit of light on the pupillage application process, and to give a little bit of insight into it for those who are involved in it. So I'm just going to go through the other panel members, and they can introduce themselves. April, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you, Jamie. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is April Amai, and I'm a barrister at Number 5 Chambers based in Birmingham. I specialise in criminal law and personal injury.
Great. Cheryl?
Hello there. Yes, I'm Cheryl Jones. I'm a barrister at 3PB Barristers. I do insolvency, probate, chancery, generally property, and quite a lot of insane litigant in person work. I'm also sit as a judge in the insolvency courts and as a recorder, and I was previously head of pupillage at 3PB for 9 years.
And Angela?
Hi all, Angela Alabi. I'm a recent junior tenant at St. Ives Chambers, having completed my common law pupillage in October last year.
All right, so that's who we are, and you will notice a split in experience and youthfulness between the four of us. Myself and Cheryl, just ever so slightly longer in the tooth than April and Angela are, and there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that this is specifically set up to give you guys advice from two different sides of the divide. So myself and Cheryl have sat on a lot of pupillage committees, a lot of interviews, sifted a lot of applications. So we can give you information from our side of that and what we see. Whereas April and Angela are very much a lot closer to where you guys are sitting and are able to give you information on what worked for them, even mistakes they may have made, what assisted them in ultimately getting over the line and getting pupillage. So we're going to go through a number of questions that have been collated from the questions that were asked in advance. They've been pulled together by Tatiana, and we've diced them up so that hopefully we capture as many of them as we can. And we're going to move through those, answering them as we go. The other element of this is the question and answer tab, which a number of you have already found. And with these sorts of panels, we always allow the questions and answers, and you can feel free to type questions in there from this point. Congratulations, Ben, on being the first one in to take the lead on that. And what we will try to do is there should be some time left at the end when we finish with the questions that we know we're going to deal with in advance. And we will just try to get through as many of those as we can. But as we're going along, the individual panel members can type answers to these questions. And already Cheryl has started doing that. So we can try to answer, the ones who aren't speaking can try to answer as many of those questions as we can. And as I say, towards the end, we will try to either answer typing or verbally as many others as we can. I will say, in all of the panels that I've done for the Bar Council, which is a reasonable number, we do not get through all the questions. So we will do our best. One day we will do it, but we may not be today. So we'll do our best to get through them We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. The ones towards the end are going to be ones that we will try to answer that have as broad an application as possible, or touch on things that we haven't really spoken about at all. So we'll use our judgment on that, but ultimately we're just trying to get as much information to you guys as we can, and hopefully as many tidbits of insight and advice to help you along this path. We all appreciate how hard it is, how grueling it is, and hopefully we can make it a little bit easier, shed a bit of light on it, and help you to become a little bit more prepared for interviews. So that's enough talking from me from the start, because you're not here to hear me talking about general admin stuff. You're here to hear us all talking about pupillage interviews. So the first couple of questions are going to be dealt with by April and Angela, and are about preparation and how you can handle yourselves day to day in the run up to interview season. So if I the first question I've got on the list is how best to prepare for individual interviews, including overcoming nerves and avoiding being overwhelmed, which probably goes hand in hand with your preparation. So April, do you want to give an answer to that first?
Yes, thank you, Jamie. What I would firstly advise is, of course, preparation is key. And I appreciate that this question includes how to overcome anxiety, nerves, and overwhelm. And a lot of the time, from my experience, anxiety and nerves came from being somewhat lacking in preparation. So the key thing is preparing to the best of your ability. And how do you do that? What I would advise is try to think of potential questions that might come up. So one area I'd advise looking at is actually looking back at your written application, because that sometimes can give an indication as to what questions that the pupillage panel may ask you in interview, and that they may ask you to expand on. For example, potential questions could be, why have you decided to become a barrister? They seem like quite obvious questions to ask, but you'd be surprised the number of people that don't actually prepare for those types of questions. Or why have you decided to join that specific set of chambers? Why do you want to be self-employed as opposed to going to the employed bar? Or why have you picked that certain area of practice? So those types of questions. Other examples could be, when have you worked under pressure? When has something not gone your way? These are examples of typical pupillage questions that come up time and time again, that I certainly have been asked myself. In terms of techniques as to how to prepare, I'd advise doing mock interviews, and specifically, if you can, ask someone who is already within the profession. So, for example, a mentor, a legal mentor preferably, or a barrister, or someone that may not necessarily be at the set that you're applying to, that you've applied to, but knows the techniques and the procedure, and that can give you constructive criticism in relation to your mock interview. And I'd highly recommend timing yourself. You'd be surprised how easy it is to go on a tangent and to sometimes over expand on things that may not necessarily be answering the question, or may not necessarily be that relevant. So it's really about practicing to the best of your ability, doing the mock interviews time and time again until it becomes extremely natural to you. And I'd also advise that you record yourself. So even if you feel a bit silly, practicing your answers out loud, it's fine. It's still very, very useful in preparation for your interview, to hear exactly what you sound like and what the pupillage panel will be listening to. So that would be my advice in relation to preparing, and also ultimately reducing the overwhelm and anxiety leading up to your interview.
You're muted, Jamie.
I didn't even make it past the first question before speaking whilst muted. Disappointed in myself. Angela, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, or if you want to move on to the next question.
Yeah, I can add. In terms of nerves, I think my advice would be, have a plan, have a routine, and by that I mean, for your first interview, you might not know what a pupillage interview might be like, but you might want to have a routine that you've put in place so that on the day it's sort of mechanic. I don't know if you think about it in the same way, like a sports team might come and arrive at the stadium, but they've had their pre-match meal before, they have their certain playlist that they're playing in the changing rooms, they have their warm-up, and then they have match time. I think it's helpful to like structure your time in that way. So for me, it was finding, and this is reducing nerves on the day of interview. But if you've prepped this before, it will reduce your nerves in the lead up. So I'd have a library that was close to the chambers that I'd already earmarked to work in just before. So if that was in London, it'd be one of the inn libraries. And if it was off circuit, I'd have found somewhere, as well as the music I would listen to as I'm walking to the interview, just to put me in the right frame of mind, as well as, and I don't know if anyone else does this, but I would like visualize. I even did this when I was like applying for like paralegal interviews. I'd visualize the congratulations I get when I've already gotten it, so that by the time I entered the chambers, it would feel like I was just doing a formality to the already achieved end result. That's just kind of like a mental game you might play with yourself to relax yourself, put yourself in the right frame of mind so that you can execute to the best of your ability. And in terms of preparing, well, hopefully you've been keeping abreast of the legal news throughout the year because you're really interested in the bar and your practice area, hopefully. And one thing Jamie was saying before we actually started this webinar was to remember to take care of yourself because, as I said, it can be very interview, pupillage, which is the whole point of you all being here. I appreciate that. But you're no good to anyone if you're not taking time out, going on walks, going on runs, eating properly, sleeping properly, and all of the above.
Yeah, if it is something I mentioned before we came online. If I can just reiterate that I think there's been a little bit of a shift away from this mindset in recent years, but certainly traditionally, there's that big focus on how much do you want it, how much do you want to be a barrister, how tenacious are you. Work ethic and attitude and ambition are all well and good, and you need to a degree all three of those things, but you're not doing it right if you're doing any of those things to the detriment of your health. And it's not just preparation for interview and helping you to prepare for interviews better. It can help you with the nerves in the run up and waiting to hear about the outcomes of applications. And as and when you become barristers, you need to be able to take care of yourself as well. Otherwise, you just burn out. So that is really important at a base level to take care of yourself. And there's so many more resources, there's so much knowledge around about that now. And it can just help if you find yourself struggling at any stage of the process, just to sort of get back to, as Angela said, a routine. And to be kind to yourselves. I appreciate that's a bit of a trope. It's okay to just, you've got a spare day, you're waiting on an outcome of pupillage applications, binge a television series. That's absolutely fine.
Jamie, if I can
Yeah.
jump in here, I always say that if you had a prize racehorse, you would look after it incredibly well. You would make sure it had the right food, it had the right environment, it got the right rest. You are your own prize racehorse. Treat yourself accordingly.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And even something as simple as get enough sleep makes a huge amount of difference. Yeah, I really can't stress that enough. It's not necessarily the advice you came onto this call to hear, but it's really is important to bear in mind. So moving on to the next one, this is where Cheryl and I are going to come in. What are common mistakes that candidates make in interview that are easy to avoid? So Cheryl, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, the first one I would say, actually, the biggest mistake I think I've seen is people trying to be something they're not. Because you're doing yourself no favors and you're not doing Chambers any favors, and it will come over very often in your interview. So be who you are. Don't try to be somebody else. Don't try to play to what you think the perfect barrister is. And another thing I would say, which is a mistake, although it's not something that people usually think about, but be comfortable in what you're wearing when you attend an interview. Don't wear something that's too tight. Don't wear something that's uncomfortable. Don't wear something that's going to flap around all over the place and distract you, because you need to walk into that room feeling comfortable and feeling confident. And one other thing, don't wear your coat into the interview room, and please take it off. Otherwise, you just look as if you want to leave. You don't look as if you belong. And one of the things you really need to do when you walk into that room is to look as if you belong there, as if you're comfortable there, or as comfortable as you can be. Talk to the panel. Don't talk to the floor. Don't talk to the computer. Don't talk to the ceiling. Talk to the panel. If there's more than one and you're not sure who to look at, pick one, talk to them, and then flick your eyes to the others if you can. Make them realize that you are a person who's interacting with them. You're not just doing something by rote. If you're doing something remotely, do make sure you can see and hear properly. Make sure it's quiet. Make sure that your background looks professional and isn't distracting. These are small things, but they make a difference to you. And I think they make a great difference to the panels as well. Jamie, what about you? What are the ones that you've come across that you think are the most obvious mistakes?
I agree with those, but I'm going to take the low hanging fruit and say speaking too soon and too quickly. It's and this is everybody tells you this. There's already been some questions in the chat about it, about speaking slowly. It is not something that we tell you just for the sake of it. We do this in our jobs day to day in court when I'm giving submissions. Even when I'm asking questions in cross-examination, we slow ourselves down in order to give us time to think about what we're going to say next, to organize our thoughts. And that is important from the first day as it is the last of your career. So it's just as important in interview. That there's the impression that some people get when they come into interview is that when they are asked a question, they should immediately know a fully formed answer that they can just regurgitate. And that's not how it works. It's not how it works in interview, and it's not how it works in the real world. Cheryl mentioned being a recorder. I'm a recorder as well. And in judicial interviews, they do similar sorts of things. And again, when you're applying to be a judge, they ask you questions to test your competencies, and you don't immediately know the answer. You have to think about it, even if it's just 2, 3, 5, 10 seconds. It's not a long period of time, but it can really help you arrange your thoughts. And then when you're actually talking, slowing down the speed of your speech, small gaps between sentences can really not just help you to moderate your thoughts, but to regulate your own emotions and nerves as well. Whereas conversely, if you feel that pressure to start as soon as a question has been asked and to speak at speed, you're going to make yourself more nervous, you're going to trip yourself up, and that's just going to spiral down and affect your performance. Just slow yourself down. Just practice it. Practice it before you go in. When you're practicing test answers, just think about how you can slow yourself down and be calm. Because I promise you, and you're told this all the time, and it's true, your audience will not notice when you are talking slow. By which I mean that in your head, it sounds like you're talking really slow, and to them, it doesn't. I've done it several times in the answer to this question, and none of you have noticed that I've done it. But that is the way that you should just be moderating and staying in control of the answer that you're giving, and that applies to pretty much any answer you give, whether that's a set question, or an interruption during an advocacy exercise, or another answer you're giving. Just think, slow it down. It makes such a huge difference, which is why we keep telling you to do it. Okay, the next one, right? Common questions to prepare for in advance don't really exist. So if you're expecting me to give you a list of 5 questions, I'm just not going to do that. The reason I'm not going to do that is because every Chambers is different in the questions that they ask, what they're trying to get from those questions, the scoring framework, how long they expect you to speak, the way they might challenge you. You cannot prepare for interviews by preparing a set list of answers to a set list of questions. The way that you prepare is the way that April and Anjola have already told you to prepare. It is about broad knowledge, awareness, and competence, and that will equip you to answer the vast majority of questions. But there are two quick tips that I can give on that. The first is that when you are reviewing current events, issues, and this is throughout the year, this isn't just in the run-up to interview season, do be intellectually curious about what you're reading. It's all very well and good going on to the BBC website and seeing that, to take a very recent example, the government are going to look at special education lead reforms and have put forward their proposal for that. It's all very well and good reading what is on the BBC website about that. It's all very well and good reading a couple of other sources. But particularly if you're going for a pupillage that is relevant to that, if you're being interviewed at one of the sets that deals with this work, like Doughty Street and Matrix and 39 Essex and 3PB, delve into it deeper. Look at what other people are saying about it. Inform yourself about it. Read the white paper, things like that. You don't have to do that on every topic, but do it on ones that you think might be particularly relevant to you or that you're interested in. Delve a little bit deeper, because that will allow you to make better points. The second thing is you can practice competency-based questions. If there are chambers who ask you competency-based questions, which is give us an example of a time when you something like that, you can practice those using the STAR system, and that's really a good structure for all answers. But you can practice those and you can prepare for those by thinking in advance of specific standout times from maybe the bar course, maybe work, maybe other things, when some of those relevant competencies might come into play when you have displayed them. So you can think about those. You can look at examples of competency-based questions. You can think about how you might answer the ones on the list. They're not all going to be relevant to pupillage, but they will give you some practice in answering questions of that nature. And the reason why I can tell you that works is because the Judicial College asks those when you apply to be a judge. So if you want to be a judge, you definitely need to get across competency-based questions. So I know from relatively recent experience that you can practice them and it can help and make that easier. So general awareness, intellectual curiosity in terms of your preparation, you can specifically practice competency-based questions. So I do both of those things. But it may be that Cheryl has some specific questions that she can pop out with. So I'll see. I may yet be surprised.
No, I agree with you. You can't learn the answers to questions off by heart. And there's a very good reason for that anyway. Even if you could, it comes over as not being spontaneous. It comes over as being by rote. And you're not really showing yourself, because part of the reason for asking the questions is we want to see how people react. We want to see how people cope with them. And you can take a little bit of time. There's nothing wrong with a small bit of silence whilst you think about it. I mean, you are likely to be asked the usual questions. Unfortunately, some chambers are not terribly creative. So why do you want to be a barrister? Well, that you should know why you want to be a barrister. I think it's still quite a difficult question to answer, but you can have your reasons for that already there in your toolbox. Why this particular chambers? Well, if you've gone to a chambers and you've got an interview, you should have taken your time to read it up and to be able to say why this particular chambers and what it is attracts you about it. I also think it's a very good idea before you go into an interview to have an idea of how chambers operates. In other words, so you don't make mistakes when you're talking about why you want to be in that chambers or why you want to be a barrister. Understand how they're structured. I've always been surprised by the number of people who've come to an interview and will talk about the company or the firm. We're neither. We're chambers. You're going to be self-employed. You may be asked questions. Certainly our chambers may ask you a question about how you're going to cope as being self-employed, how you think it's going to affect you, what you think the most difficult bit of it is. So you need to think about that. And I think you do need to think about what the job actually entails, because that will help you with a lot of the questions that come from a number of chambers. where they are looking to see, in a sense, what you understand about the job you're going to be asked to do. Remember, it's not just an interview for pupillage. That's the 1 year when you're in training. People are also looking to what you're going to do beyond pupillage. So you do need to have an idea of what the arc is going to be and where you want to end up in a few years' time. I think all of those are things you need to look at and prepare for, and they will help you answer some of the perhaps more common questions about being a barrister that you will get from some chambers.
I was kind of hoping you just list a load of questions and prove me wrong, Cheryl.
I'm so sorry, Jamie, but I wouldn't do that anyway, because every chambers, and this is something else, I've been reading quite a lot of the answers of the questions that we've been getting as we've been going along, and a lot of them we can't give you a list, we can't give you a template. It's impossible, because first of all, every chambers is different, but also every interview, even the ones that are very carefully orchestrated, will turn out differently. There will be slightly different questions. There will be pivots to different things depending on what's on your CV or what's in your application form. So we cannot give you a reader, we cannot give you a template for what to do at an interview. What we can do is try and give you enough tools and enough information that you can use. So sorry, Jamie, sorry to have let you down, but no.
You never let me down, Cheryl. Surely not. Right. Technically, the next two questions on the list are also for Cheryl and I, and it's a topic I really want to get to. But before I do, I'm going to go back to April and Anjola. The question nearly next on the list, but it's come up a number of times in the chat already, is about preparing for ethics questions. And to a degree, for myself and Cheryl, it's just kind of a matter of experience and having a bit of a feel of what to do in those situations. So it might be useful for the people watching to get an idea of how you guys specifically prepared for ethics issues, if in fact you did specifically prepare for them. So April, do you want to give a view on that?
So I recently did a Middle Temple education day, whereas I'm teaching on ethics and advocacy. That was last Saturday. And I was told that they've slightly changed the rules in relation to the exam. So I was told that it's no longer open book. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat box, but I believe now it's closed book. That's slightly different to when I did the exam. But I'll still say the same thing that I told them on Saturday, which is that you really need to familiarise yourself with the BSB handbook. You really need to familiarise yourself with the core duties specifically. Do know most rules that are related to the core duties. I know there's so many of them. There's different rules, guidances and outcomes. And I know some of you may think it's impossible to know them all, but if it is in fact closed book, then just try your best to know the core duties, which is somewhat expected anyway. And just practically speaking, in terms of approaching each question asked of you, I'd advise firstly, read the question carefully, because from recollection, there can be several different issues that they throw in one question. It's really important that you identify them all, because it's expected that you'll be able to address them all in your answers, or in the answer that you pick. So really reread questions, identify the core issues, and then apply. It's literally the IRAC method or ILAC method: issue, law, application, conclusion. Identify the issue, apply the law that you should already know. In this case, it'll be the rules or the core duties. And essentially that's it. So that's how I would approach ethics. I wouldn't necessarily leave it last minute. So I'm happy to see that many of you are already asking about ethics. A lot of people underestimate ethics and think it's an exam that you can just like do and cram the night before. But in all honesty, it is very relevant in our day-to-day lives as practicing barristers. I will say that now that I'm practicing and not just sitting an exam, ethics comes up nearly every single day for me, where I'm thinking, okay, is this ethical? Do I need to call the helpline? Do I need to speak to a senior member of Chambers about this? Do I need a second opinion? And you learn as you go. So practically speaking, that's how I would approach the exam. But in reality, you will learn as you go, and no day is the same. But you should have the support of Chambers, the ethics helpline, and just your own knowledge from the bar course. So hopefully that helps.
Jamie,
Jamie.
Zoom told me I nearly toggled it in time as well. I'm going to try not to get. I'm pretty sure if it's the third time, I'm out and somebody else has to be chair. But we'll see. We'll see how we go with that. Angela, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but the other question that I was going to tack onto this is how, if there's anything you can do to prepare for unexpected or random questions, or having to make extempore answers completely off the cuff. So I don't know if you want to mop both of those up.
yeah, I agree with what April said. In the context of an interview where you're given an ethical problem, sometimes it'll be explicit. You're now going to have an ethical problem, in which case, great, because you know what you're about to be faced with. Where it's not explicit, if something smells off, there's probably a dead rat somewhere, is my general, that's my general philosophy for those. Have a smell of it, if that makes sense. Your foundational principles, your first principles are the core duties. If you want to be extremely thorough and detailed, then you can then delve into the rules. So I think having those core duties memorized by heart, if you can, will always help, because you'll always be able to situate whatever problem you're given within the framework of the core duties. And then the second limb is the practical aspects. I think Chambers want to see that you have a practical understanding as to how you would actually tackle this in practice, which is difficult to get if you haven't actually practiced before. But if you think practically about things like the chain of command, or the support system you might lean on, for instance, at what point in your ethical dilemma is it then time to ask your pupil supervisor or your head of chambers, or call the bar council helpline, or not take a point because you're not sure whether it's arguable or not, but it's not detrimental to your case and you don't have time to call the ethics helpline. That sort of practical understanding, I think, might be the type of things that might get you good marks. And in terms of answering off the cuff, first principles again is what I would lean on. If you're given a question that you've not prepared for, I would think in first principles. If it's practice area specific, for instance, taking contract, what are the philosophical principles of contract? What are the bare bones of what makes a contract in itself, offer, acceptance, etc. So thinking at its base level and then trying to work up from there. In all things, both in the ethical and the random questions you haven't prepared for, I think taking time is always really important, and also vocalizing your reasoning. Because if you vocalize your reasoning, that's the only way you can get marks, even though you don't achieve the final answer, perhaps. But also, a kind panel might throw you a bone and assist you if they can see that you're on the right lines and you're getting there. So, it's not easy when you get things you haven't prepared for, but if you take a step back and consider what the foundational principles it is they're asking you, take a moment to pause and think of your repository knowledge on it. You'd be surprised with what you can come up with, I think.
That'll bring me on to the question that I said I wanted to tackle next. And it's a very common theme through the questions that are being answered in the chat, which is the question that I've got written down here above me is, how should you prepare for legal, topical, current affairs questions, especially if you have limited knowledge on a particular issue? And along with that, what's the best way to prepare for assess minis, advocacy exercises, problem questions with limited preparation time, and so on and so forth? And there's lots of similar questions to that in the chat. One key piece of advice that somebody always says at some point in these sorts of panels, and I'm saying it now: you have to understand what this process is and is not. It is not an exam. You cannot prepare for it like an exam, and you cannot give answers to the questions as if they are exam questions. That is not how it works. And I'm not saying that to be patronizing in any way. I'm saying that because the majority of people who are watching this right now will have spent the last however many years of their life through academia, where that is exactly what you do year on year. You study for an exam, you take an exam, you study for an exam, you take for an exam. Even the bar course, which is more vocational, is set up in that way. Pupillage interviews are not. And the key to understanding preparation in a wider sense is understanding what the interview is and what it is that we are assessing. Because if you fall into the trap of thinking that if you just read this case a few more times to get it right, or if you just review the CPR a little bit more, or the criminal procedure rules, or whatever it may be, or you just read a lot more from news articles about legal issues over the past year, you'll nail your preparation. That suggests that you think there's going to be a right answer to the questions, and there isn't normally a right answer to the question. Or if there is, it's not even necessarily a bad thing or something that you can't recover from if you don't get that right answer, because chambers are not assessing your ability to come up with the one answer to a question. Chambers is assessing your skills and potential to be a barrister. So yes, a part of that is intellectual ability. But most sets, outside of perhaps the very top commercial sets, and they're a very small minority of the profession, have seen most of what they need to know about your intellectual ability from your grades, and you're already through to interview, so they're probably good enough at that point. We're then looking for your ability to assimilate information, your ability to pick out the relevant parts of that information, your ability to form those into cohesive arguments, and your ability to react quickly to pressure and to questions that come your way. All these sorts of things are things that you will use day to day as a barrister. When a judge asks you a question about an application and you give an answer, the judge is not going to say, that is the right answer, ding, 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 application succeeds. That is not how it works. And every barrister will give a slightly different answer to that question. So it's not about being word perfect in your answers. What we are looking for is, yes, somebody who ticks our particular frameworks in a particular way, and all chambers are different with that. But we are not looking for set things. You must do these 3, 4, 5 things, and then you're getting through to second round interview, or you're getting pupillage. We are interested in you as a candidate, and we do not know who the best candidates are until we see you. It is not a matter of you fitting into our particular box. You show us who you are. And as a panel, whilst we will challenge you and we're looking to put you under pressure, we want you to succeed. We want to see who you are. So rather than being in the mindset of, what do I need to study in order to pass this interview? It needs to be, who am I as a candidate? Who am I as a barrister? What are the skills I have that make me stand out? And how do I demonstrate those? Part of that is the preparation we've talked about in terms of being familiar with current affairs. Obviously, having knowledge of laws in your practice area and being on top of case law and things helps to a degree, but that is to further your potential as a barrister, not to essentially do an oral exam, because that's not what it is. So that is broad. It's not as specific as some of you will have wanted it to be, but it goes to the heart of the vast majority of those questions that talk about, how do I prepare for X, Y, Z? Get out of the student exam mindset, get into the potential future barrister interview mindset. Cheryl, do you want to add on to that?
Yes, I would. I mean, I agree with every word you've said. It's not an exam. There are sometimes no right answers, no wrong answers. And we're often very often looking at the processes and the way you handle things. So the very fact that it's unexpected is actually part of the process. And I go back to there is no template. Each process is different. I would say in terms of dealing with questions, in terms of dealing, and we're getting a lot of questions on this as well, in terms of dealing with last minute advocacy exercises, get 10 minutes or whatever, is to get into the habit and the mindset now and start to practice of just giving yourself a general structure. So first I will read the question, then I will note what the facts are, then I will note what the law is, and then I'll try and put them together. You do have to think quite fast. You do have to deal with it quite fast. But if you can get friends to set you strange questions and then go through that, or look at a case and go through it, look at the facts, look at the law, think about how you would do it. That's the best you can do. It is a very, very different technique. If you're asked something you don't know and you genuinely don't know and can't answer it, don't flaff around. It happens to all of us. Even in court, you will get asked questions sometimes and you sit there and think, I don't know the answer. And the worst thing you can do is flaff around and try and fool a panel of barristers, because they will know that you don't know what you're talking about. And you are likely in that case to start repeating yourself if you think you've got one point, which is annoying. Say you don't know. Say, I'm afraid that's something that I have not come across. Don't be afraid of silence. Give yourself a few minutes to think. No reasonable chambers is going to expect you to know everything all of the time. And an honesty that you don't know and it's something you need to learn can be very disarming. Nobody likes somebody who makes things up or who won't admit to weakness. Remember, you're at the start of your career. Nobody expects you to know everything. In fact, it's quite reassuring if you're on a panel and you have people who do need to learn things, because occasionally you have somebody coming in who gives the impression that they know everything and they don't need to learn anything. And you sit there thinking, well, what am I going to teach you over the next year if I give you pupillage? So don't worry about not knowing things. We don't expect you to know everything. And don't repeat yourself and don't chatter just to fill time.
Right. Next question. Variations on a theme to a degree. Well, there's a question about how to prepare specifically for individual chambers prior to being interviewed. So I think that's probably best over to April and Anjola. Anjola, do you want to start on that?
Yeah. The way I've interpreted this question is it's to do with the chambers, anything specific about that chambers. If they've given you a steer on the interview format, that should sort of be your Bible just before you go into your interview and as you're preparing for the interview. So any idiosyncrasies about the way it might be, you should work on that. If they have a particular type of exercise, like if they tell you there will be a bail application, or prep a bail application. If they tell you there'll be a summary judgment application, well, then do that. In terms of chambers specifically, if you know anyone who's had experience of interviewing in that chambers, it might be helpful to reach out to them. I appreciate this will not always be available. But all I can think of is getting to the bottom of what makes that chambers tick. So obviously their practice areas are paramount, but any big cases they've been on, and the way to get a feel of what Chambers is doing or what Chambers prioritizes is probably in their news section. So in the news section, they will write articles in the areas they practice in. They will advertise any initiatives they support. And from there, I think you can glean a general ethos from the chambers if it's not already explicit on their website. So I think just taking the time to consider that and how your answers for why the bar might be fine-tuned as to why the bar in that chambers make sense in terms of how you prepare for any specific chambers.
April, have you got anything to add to that?
I concur with everything that Njola has already said. The only thing I'd add is try to attend open days if possible to understand chambers as a whole, familiarise yourself with the people there, introduce yourself, be a known face if it's possible, and just also continue working on upskilling, continue obtaining as much experience as you can. Don't just, obviously don't overwhelm yourself and panic and become, go into a frenzy, but don't stop there, because you never know what the outcome will be, but continue to upskill, continue to obtain experience. And yeah, everything Njola's already said, I completely concur with. So yeah.
That last point's really important. It perhaps wasn't explicit enough in what I said earlier about preparation, but you can't demonstrate skills you don't have. So you have to, that process of upskilling, of developing year on year, is really important. I wrote about this when I was on Twitter, which I haven't been for quite a number of years, but there was a Twitter thread that I did a good few years ago now, where I posted extracts from my first pupillage applications, and they were bad. Really, really, really bad. They would be among that just completed the SIFT exercise now. They would be among the worst I saw if I saw my own first applications. Absolutely terrible. But about 2.5 years after I made those, I got pupillage, and now I'm a barrister and I'm all right. It's going fine. So during your practice, you will year on year, month on month, get better with experience, and you should be doing that within the pupillage application exercise as well. The processes of looking to develop those skills, of get relevant experience. You should just be getting better, which again is not something you're doing it to a degree when you're doing your degree and things like that, but not so overtly, because it's learn exam, and you'll develop skills as you go. But there's a much more of a focus on that development as you go along. If you don't manage to get over the line this year, there's no reason to think you can't do it next year, because you should be improving. And we see the same people year on year in interviews, and we don't sit there going, oh, weren't good enough last time, so they won't be good enough this time. We hope to see improvement. And I have, and I'm sure Cheryl has as well, seen candidates who didn't do well in interview one year and have been offered pupillage the next, because that's the nature of the game. That's how it works. So that upskilling, I absolutely endorse that. There's in our crib sheet, we've got 5 minutes allocated to this question, Cheryl, but I don't think it's going to take that long. Is it wise to study or contact the pupillage responsible member of chambers before an interview?
No, don't. It's really annoying, and it doesn't take you anywhere. You might not be interviewed by them anyway, and it doesn't take you forward at all. It just makes you look terribly anxious. And if you know who your panel is in advance, and sometimes you do, particularly with remote panels, by all means go and look them up so that you know what they look like and you feel a little bit comfortable with them. But otherwise, no.
Got another 4 minutes, 15 seconds. Do you not want to fill any more?
No, I can tell some war stories if you like.
No, I'm not entirely sure how that ended up on the crib sheet with a 5 minutes next to it. But there we are. So moving on to this is another this is an important set of questions that Cheryl and I can take the lead on. So they're very much related, but for slightly different reasons. What advice would you give to those considering a career change to the bar later in life, including mature candidates, those with prior careers? And different answers, but it falls within sort of the same bucket. Advice that we give to candidates navigating neurodivergence in pupillage interviews and addressing negative connotations. I'm just going to very briefly address both of those, and then I'm going to let Cheryl do the same thing. So the one thing that is in common with both of these is that there are going to be some barristers who either overtly or not, take against mature candidates and take against neurodivergent candidates. They shouldn't, but they do. And that's the nature of life more than anything else. So when it comes to negative connotations of either of those things, my advice, to be perfectly honest, is not to worry about it, because you can't do anything about it. And certainly pretending to be something that you're not. I'm not sure how you can pretend not to be a mature candidate, but pretending to be something that you're not is not something that you should have in your repertoire for interviews. It should very much be the opposite of showing who you are. And on that basis, whilst there's going to be that natural concern that certain aspects of your characteristics are going to be held against you, I don't think that should influence the way that you approach interviews. If you need specific assistance, adjustments, accommodations, and that can be on the basis of adjustments for disabilities, or it can be something like, I'm a mature candidate with a family and I need interviews to be at a certain time because of childcare commitments. Ask for it. Please ask for it. Because whilst I appreciate that panel members are scary, we are also human beings. And again, there will be some chambers who can't accommodate it, who won't accommodate it. Again, it's life. For the vast majority of us, if we can, we will, and we will be more than happy to. And that is the way it should be. So please ask for it. In terms of general tips on mature candidates, there are certain things that you don't bring to the table that younger candidates do, and there are certain things you bring to the table that younger candidates don't. And in a variation of the theme of showing chambers who you are, what you do have that younger candidates don't is lived experience and prior careers and other skills that you've developed. So use them, demonstrate them. You can't pretend if you are 45 in an interview that you are 25 in the interview, because you're not. But that doesn't mean that you can't leverage what you've done in that 20-year difference to your advantage, because you absolutely can. And in the same way that there are, when I see written applications from people who've done mini pupillages but say virtually nothing about them, I see applications from mature candidates who've had this career that they don't tie in any way to the skills that they need for the bar, and they don't tell me how it relates to their potential to be a pupil. So these are things that you have, and you have to make the most of them. And some of that will come naturally, as I say, because of the experience you have in life. It counts for more than you might think. But also, you have experience of dealing with a wide range of people, dealing with people in the workplace, navigating issues, the skills you have built up in your previous career. So use them. And the final point on neurodivergence or any sort of other characteristic disability that you might have, is you don't need to hide it. You shouldn't feel the need to hide it. And as I say, if there are specific adjustments or differences that you need chambers to take in terms of their approach, do ask for them. But I mean, I give one example. One of St John's Building's recent tenants is autistic. I mean, you wouldn't. There's no reason why you would know. And there's and again, in interview, it may lead to you displaying certain behaviors that you know are related to your neurodivergence, but you'd be amazed at the range of behaviors that we see in interview. And the reality is that it's so unlikely that someone is going to want to or is actually going to tie that to it. So I understand, particularly with the lack of tolerance that you can see in various places, including social media, for these things, that you'd be concerned about it. And aside from asking for adjustments that you need about it, please don't be. I think the majority of the bar at this point approaches it the way it should, and that's only getting better each year in terms of the way that that sort of thing is dealt with. I felt like I'd spoke for a long time there. I might have taken some of your 4 minutes, 15 seconds, Cheryl. Is there
All
anything
right,
you
fine.
want to
Well,
add to
not
this
at all.
thing?
Yes, I would, because I can actually speak with some personal experience of both. I came to the bar 30 years ago as a mature student with teenage children following a divorce, and having a very unusual background. I did not have a previous career, unless you count being a professional housewife overseas as a career. I had previously been a secretary, so I had every possible disadvantage from that point of view. And I am also ADHD, although I hadn't been obviously diagnosed at the time. Like many people, I'm late diagnosed. So I am a walking, breathing, living example of the fact that the bar has, for at least 30 years, been relatively welcoming. I say relatively because, yes, there are one or two problems. But unlike Jamie, I don't see it as a major issue, either of them, at the moment. The advice I would give to anybody as a mature student is this. Don't give in to imposter syndrome, as many people do, and that covers everybody. But don't also, you're not at a disadvantage. You have many advantages, as Jamie did say. You have perhaps experiences that younger people haven't had. On the other hand, you have slightly more baggage than younger people have. So it sort of equals it all up. Even more importantly, because this is something I have seen quite often from mature students who have had previous careers, is that they come in and they tend to exude an air of superiority. Please don't. You are coming into a profession where you don't know any more than somebody who's coming in at 23, 24 usually. Even if you've observed it from the outside, it's very different from coming in from the inside. So be humble in an appropriate way. And that actually goes for everybody. In other words, you don't know everything, but you have a lot to bring to the table, irrespective of your age and background. You can bring, and the other point that Jamie raised, which I think was a very good one, is, and again, it applies across the board, perhaps a little bit more though to those who are mature entrants, which is that you should relate what you've done as best you can to the qualities that are needed as a barrister, which brings you back to the point you need to know what qualities you need to have and relate them directly. You can do the same thing with your hobbies. You can do the same thing with your interests. Each thing can have a specific assistance, can specifically relate to something that you need to do as a barrister. So some of the best application forms I've seen have been when somebody's taken something quite unexpected, like powerboat racing, and applied it to a quality that's needed as a barrister. In that particular case, the quality of not being afraid when things go wrong and simply dealing with them, because that's what you have to do. So I think everybody can use all of their advantages to showcase. The issue of neurodivergence is, of course, a much more recent matter that's really come to the fore in the last 10 years or so, I would say. And again, I think most chambers, they will have quite a lot of neurodivergent people in them. This is a profession which attracts those of us who, whether neurodivergent or otherwise, think outside the box a bit, are a little bit different. It's a profession for people who are individuals. To be quite frank, a lot of the features of people who have neurodivergent issues, whether ADHD or autism or the combination, lend themselves very well to being a barrister. So I don't think you need to be afraid of being neurodivergent or of mentioning it. Chambers are not supposed to take all of that into account, and they shouldn't. They should be looking at you as you are. And I don't think it's, for the vast majority of chambers that you apply to, it's not going to be an issue. The only thing that most chambers are interested in at the end of the day is, can you do the job and can you do it really well? And one of the wonderful things about being a barrister and being in this profession is that there are many different ways of doing it brilliantly. If you go into court and you observe a chancery silk, and then you go into court and you observe a criminal silk, they are completely different in the way they approach it, in their skill sets. They all have the basics, but how they express it is completely different. Yes, deal with it, but I don't think you should be afraid as a mature student or as somebody who's neurodivergent, or both. One question that came up that I said I would deal with live, which is what is a mature candidate? Good question. I always used to say I was an old candidate, but maturity was something I hadn't quite yet achieved. I'm still not entirely sure I've achieved it, but I think generally we think anybody over the age of about 25 is starting to be a mature candidate, and definitely over the age of 30.
If
Right.
this helps, sorry,
Yeah.
I think the average age people start pupillage is about 28. So if that's a gauge for what's mature.
Yeah, it's gone up. It has. I mean, when I came to the bar, the vast majority of people who were obtaining pupillage were 23, 24.
Yeah, it was a do your academics and fly straight into it sort of situation.
Absolutely.
It's very different now for a whole host of reasons. Okay. So approaching the end of the questions that we've got prepared, and then we'll start hitting some more in the chat that we haven't had a chance to get to yet. I'm just going to, well, actually, no, I'm gonna read this one out and pass it over to April and Anjola. Two questions that are very much related, but I'll say them both anyway. If you could give yourself one piece of advice at the time you were being interviewed, what would it be and why? What's the one thing you know now, but wish someone had told you about pupillage and life at the bar? So there's nothing like a nice specific question. But April, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, dealing with the first question in relation to interviewing, I'm somewhat repeating myself again, but the one piece of advice I'd give myself in relation to interviewing is to just be myself, be authentic. It's already been stated already, but authenticity is very attractive and it can't be replicated. So be yourself. Don't try to be who you think the panel want to see. Don't be afraid to ask questions, reasonable questions. On that note, I would somewhat avoid asking obvious questions that can easily be answered on the website, for example, because that might not be a great look. And just lastly, in relation to interviews, pause, slow down when speaking. So that would be something I'd probably tell my younger self when I was being interviewed for pupillage. But in relation to pupillage itself, what I would say is that the 12 months go by really, really quickly. I did my pupillage at the CPS in Manchester, and it seems like just yesterday that I was a pupil, but it was over 3 years ago now. But it goes by really quickly. Your first 6, when you're shadowing people, I would advise to make the most of it. Write notes, ask as much questions as possible. Don't be afraid to look silly, or don't be afraid to ask those silly questions. Don't pretend that you know something when you probably don't. They're not expecting perfection. They know that you're new to this. I'd also, if it's not already been implemented, I'd also ask to shadow other people as well if you can, because different barristers have different ways of doing things, and you can pick up on things that you could adopt and things that you probably might not want to do. So thankfully my supervisor was quite relaxed in me shadowing other barristers at the CPS, and that was very, very useful. I would also say in relation to then life at the bar is, firstly, if you've made a mistake, particularly if you're a junior barrister, own up to it as quickly as you can. Don't try to, obviously, going back to ethics, don't try to mislead the court or brush over things. Mistakes happen. I would say get an accountant as soon as you can, particularly obviously at the self-employed bar. I would say be ready to stay up past your bedtime a lot of the time, especially when you're starting out. Especially if you love your sleep, I'm afraid I have to give you a reality check, particularly if you're specialising in crime. be expected to work late evenings until you get more experienced. And lastly, what I would say is cover your back. And a lot of people said that when I first became a tenant at the self-employed bar, and I didn't fully understand what that meant because I was obviously transitioning from the employed bar. But really and truly, you'll learn very quickly that clients can be very interesting individuals, and you may have to cultivate a habit of getting them to sign endorsements, for example, especially with crime, if they want to then plead guilty, getting them to write things, confirm things. Make sure you're always in communication with your solicitors, particularly clarifying your instructions. You'd be very surprised that some solicitors make mistakes in the instructions that they send you, and sometimes you pick up those things quite quickly, and then it's always good to double check. So I have a habit of calling my solicitor even after they've sent a written brief, just to confirm that this is exactly what they want me to do. And you'd be surprised the amount of times they've said, oh, we've just copied and pasted that. We don't actually want you to do that. So yeah, I think all in all, that's the advice I'd give myself at the bar and during pupillage.
Angela, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yes. In terms of advice for interview that I would have given myself, it's don't let any one poorly answered question define your interview. I think bounce back ability is a general skill that's sought in life, but obviously at the bar. And I've seen it in some of my interviews that weren't good. It's the constant harping back to, oh, that wasn't a well-answered question. And then therefore the rest of the interview has to be a bad one, but it doesn't. And also, I think when I was helping at the Inner Temple for their scholarship interviews, you'd be surprised how the tone, the way someone starts ended up defining their interview. I think it's not very helpful mindset to have. And also, my understanding is most chambers have a score sheet. And so if you meet a certain amount of marks, you might get through to second round. But if you let the first poorly answered question define the rest of your interview, then you're not even giving yourself a chance to accumulate the marks required to progress. So don't give up on yourself, basically. And in terms of pupillage itself, I think I said this at the written application webinar, don't underestimate the leadership needed day to day in the bar. You'll have a lay client, you'll have a professional client, you might even have an expert, and all those people want to know what counsel thinks, what counsel strategy is, and how they should all conduct themselves and how the case should proceed. And so being aware of that responsibility, as well as embracing that responsibility, I think is good advice. And to give one other piece of advice in terms of interviews, this is going to sound a bit strange, but enjoy the interview. It's a difficult process. Everyone talks about how difficult it is, and that's not to be denied. But I think if you can get to the position where, okay, maybe not enjoy, but at least embrace the interview, embrace the opportunity you're given to impress a panel of barristers and embark on this career that you're all probably really excited to do.
I really like that last piece of advice, actually. It may sound really unrealistic that you're going to enjoy the interview, but it speaks to a sort of attitude and approach and mindset that can actually be really quite beneficial. If you have got an interview at any set of chambers, you've already done really very well, because only a minority of applicants at any set get an interview. But equally, very, very few people will get pupillage offers after a first interview, in the same way that you're not going to get pupillage interviews with every application. There is natural development with this, as we've said before. And on that basis, pinning your hopes on one interview and this will be the one, well, it probably won't be statistically, but that doesn't mean there isn't something you can learn from it. So that sort of pressure of, I must get the right answers. I must show them exactly what they're looking for. I understand where that comes from. We all do. But taking a broader view of the process and what that means for you as an applicant, and doing your best to embrace it is really, really good advice, actually. Um, the only question that was next on the list is any tips for dealing with imposter syndrome? Well, somebody finds out, if you could tell me, that would be great, because I need to draft a defense that was written by a very, very prominent KC in my area of law, and I'm absolutely bricking it. So if you could tell me how to deal with imposter syndrome, that would be great. We do. I don't suffer with it that much, but you're not going to get rid of imposter syndrome for interviews. You'll be looking to get rid of it in the first 10 to 20 years of your career. That's just the way it is. It's sometimes you will be very comfortable doing the job. Other times you will not quite know what's going on, and other times you will wish you were anywhere but in that courtroom at that moment in time. That's just how it goes. It's the nature of the beast, and it'll be the nature of some interviews. You will go into interviews and feel that you're welcomed, that you're nice and relaxed, that you do your best, you feel like you've done well, and you're rejected, and you'll go into another interview and you'll feel that the panel are horrible and they hated you, and you'll get a second round. And it's just the way it goes. It kind of comes back to what Angela was saying. If you can try to just relax and embrace the process, it can help to a degree. But you're going to feel imposter syndrome. You're going to be nervous. Yeah, of course you are. And there's no way to really beat that. We've got 17 minutes plus whatever time Tatiana will give us to keep on going to have a look at some of these questions. We've answered half of them already, so we're doing all right. Cheryl, have you seen any that you want to pick up on? If you haven't, I can go to somebody else while we all start looking at these questions. Ah, you're muted. Somebody else did it. It wasn't just me.
Last. Okay, fine. No, there've been a few questions on the mature pupil side of things, asking, if somebody is a career change student and there's somebody who's anonymous who says, well, they're 60, can they still become a pupil? The answer is yes. We've certainly taken on 3PB pupils in their 50s before. The difficulty for chambers as you get older is a practical one, to be honest, which is they put a lot of work in during pupillage. And as you're older, there's a sort of feeling that you may not be able to give back sufficient time to do that. Having said that, I don't think we've ever turned down anybody because of their age. If you're good enough, you're good enough. Other chambers may have a different view. And another person said they were feeling they were feeling a bit worried because they're a mature student and effectively they don't think they're arrogant. So if I gave the impression that all mature students are arrogant, I do apologize, they are not. But there is a significant minority who occasionally come over as being arrogant. Other than that, I think it's just a question for everybody, mature or otherwise, of sharpening up and doing the best you can for yourself, using your own qualities to impress the panel, because that's the only way you're going to go forward.
April and Angela, if you haven't found one that you want to go out, there's a couple that have been asked directly of you, which I can direct you to. But April, the raised eyebrow suggests, April, you might not have seen the same one that I did.
I've not seen it yet.
Do you want to do you want to pick one out and have a go at it while the rest of us are just typing furiously, trying to knock as many of them out as we can?
Sure. There's so many. Was there one that was specifically referred to me, or just a general?
It was yourself and Angela. So it's if you met pupils or junior tenants during a mini pupillage and were welcome to get in touch if you had any questions whilst applying for pupillage, is it appropriate to email for general advice for an interview at their chambers Would this not be appropriate given the context? I suppose it's would you do it, and would you be happy with somebody doing it with you at this point?
Um, so sorry, so would I be happy if someone like contacted
Then,
me?
yeah. So let's say you've sort of seen someone on a mini pupillage or at a pupillage fair, and you've said, "Contact me if you need any help." You give them contact details. Is it appropriate to email that person for general advice for an interview at their chambers? The obvious point to make is that you're not on the pupillage committee yet,
Yes, exactly.
so I'm not entirely sure what answers you could give. But
Yeah. I mean, I'd be happy to always provide feedback and assistance where I can. To be honest, on a daily basis, I get LinkedIn messages and emails about general queries about pupillage interviews and somewhat how it was for me and any tips I can give. So, in essence, I personally don't mind it, but I'm always alive to the fact that sometimes aspiring barristers can over rely on your responses and kind of take it as biblical. And I always try to manage your expectations that I am not on the pupillage panel at present. But the only experience that I can give or advice that I can give is what I've experienced myself, which was a few years ago. So it might somewhat be outdated. But no, in essence, I don't mind. I don't mind people reaching out to me to provide advice.
it's probably worth saying that it's the sort of thing, it's a long list of examples of something you can do that probably won't help very much, if at all, but it's not going to be held against you. It's not as if
No,
April's going to go running off to the pupillage committee and just say, "This person has asked for help, blackball them immediately." That's realistic. It's just not the way it works
yeah.
in practice, but it's unlikely to give you an advantage. Angela, have you, rather than me just throwing a random question at you off the cuff, have you seen anything you want to address?
I think, well, thank you, Cheryl and Jamie, because you've done a fantastic job of answering the majority of the questions. On that last question, no, I think the bar has a very good culture of helping each other in terms of the people trying to come in, uh, being helped by those who are already there. The Twitter thread that Jamie referenced earlier is one that I read when I was preparing for Pupillage. So I'm familiar with that culture. I think it might not be appropriate if they're on the panel, is what I tend to hear, but you're not going to know that unless you message. And so a polite message that is either met with a response or a polite rebuff doesn't hurt anyone, I don't think, especially if you've already met them and established some sort of rapport.
I've got a question that I'm going to answer. So there's a broader point on this that ties back to something that I said earlier. Someone's asked, what would be an excellent, convincing answer to why do you want to be a barrister? The generic answer is usually I want to be self-employed, I want to be an advocate, but I feel this may not be enough. No, that's not enough. And the reason why that's not enough is because being a barrister is not like being self-employed in other circumstances, and being an advocate is possibly the broadest, most basic definition you could give of what it is that we do. If your burning desire was to be self-employed, I'm not sure how that would bring you to the bar, because it's very, very different. Start your own business or be freelance in something or something. That's the way to be properly self-employed. This is a weird hybrid self-employed slash employed sort of situation where clerks are mostly telling you what to do, but maybe not always. And the reason why that's not enough is because it doesn't show the insight into the job that you should have. And you do have it. You do have that insight, because I know you haven't decided you want to be a barrister because you just want to be self-employed and want to be an advocate. There's more to it than that. And it's the more to it than that that gives a good answer to that question. There's not, as I said before, there's not one set good answer to that question. Why do you want to be a barrister? That's the question. I agree with Cheryl. I don't think it's a very good question. I think it's a hard question. I don't think it really tells us anything about you. But for these sorts of things, there will be chambers who ask you stupid questions, because there are still chambers who are asking stupid questions. And the answers, to one degree or another, are going to show them who you are and the insight you have. And you can't bluff that. You either know certain things about the profession or you don't. There's plenty that everybody who gets pupillage do not know about this profession until they start doing it. There'll be plenty that April and Angela have only found out during their pupillage or in tenancy. You can't know everything, just in the same way that you can't be the finished product. You absolutely cannot be. So on that sort of thing, not just for that question but others, don't worry about what is it they want to hear. Show the insight and the knowledge and the views that you have, because that is not only what they want to see, that will lead you to better answers. So yeah, it's a specific answer to that question, but also a broader point. Cheryl, I think you're next up in terms of answering.
Oh, have I got to choose a question? I've been answering them on here. So
do you want to? If you want to carry on answering them, I can just go over to April and get. Oh,
There's
April's put her hand
here.
up. I didn't even know that we were doing that. April's put her hand up. This is going to be excellent. Wait for this.
I've just looked through them and I saw one really interesting question that was actually directed to me. If you don't mind me answering, I'll read it out just in case it might benefit other people in the chat. This person has said, question for April, as an international applicant from an EU state, I qualified as barrister but didn't practice there. I imagine this question is likely to come up. How do I address this in interview, as I imagine it would come up as a question of why the English bar versus the bar in my home country? Any tips on how to address this question, this interview? This is quite relevant to me actually, because I'm from Ireland. So I did my undergrad in Dublin at DCU. My journey to the bar is quite interesting. I'm not going to go into that. But ultimately, I got a job in Manchester, became a financial crime analyst, and then I wanted to pursue the bar in the UK. And obviously, I then had to do the GDL, etc. So it was a bit of a longer process for me. But I say all that to say, I was of course asked why I didn't want to practice in my home country as opposed to obviously the UK, and I had to be prepared to answer that question. So the first thing I'd say to you is, yes, it may very well come up in your interviews, and be prepared to answer the question honestly. I don't know your circumstances, and it's not necessarily for me to know, but what I will say to you is, yes, be prepared to answer that question very honestly, and give good reasons as to why you are committed to practice in England and Wales. So that's not going on to like my second tip for you is, if you are applying to a completely different country, or even let's say you're applying to a completely different city, and let's say you're not based there, a lot of panel members will want to know just how committed you are to moving, or if it's practical. So be prepared to answer that too. And also, obviously, you've stated that you've qualified already in the EU. I'm not particularly sure what EU state you're from or that you reside in, but obviously you have the competency to have already qualified. So the key thing here is to remember that, to showcase that you are competent and able to do the job. So that's what I would advise very quickly to you. Hopefully that helps.
Tatiana's telling me that we need to wrap up. I don't think she's going to give me any time past 7 o'clock. Just one more question for me, and I'll give Angela an opportunity to answer one more quickly. Question about interests. We do often get questions about interests. The questions about what they should be, whether they should relate to the bar and things like that. Interests are not something that you are marked upon. They are something that tell us who you are. And don't try and fake it. You are who you are, and that is absolutely fine. For now, up until this point, you've been seeing me as a barrister of a certain level of experience who might have some insight for the purposes of your pupillage applications. When I come off this, because my case has fallen apart for tomorrow, so I've got more time, I'm going to sit down and play computer games. Whether it's on my PlayStation 5 or Steam, I don't know. I haven't decided yet. It's been a while since I managed to play one. I'm just going to sit down and play one for a couple of hours. And that all of a sudden makes me a little bit more of a human being, because there's going to be plenty of you who are doing that afterwards as well. We are just human beings who want to know your interests. We just want to know who you are as a human being. Don't try and bluff it or say what you think we want to hear, anything like that. Just be who you are. It's fine. Absolutely fine. Angela, do you want to answer any particular question that you've seen?
I haven't seen any ones that haven't been answered that I would like to take, I don't think, or addressed to me. But I'm conscious when we come to these things that I always want to give specific advice in terms of how to prep for interview. And I've always sworn by the Inner Temple newsletter as an excellent source of an all-in-one guide to what's going on in the bar. The Bar Council also produces so much that can give you that insight Jimmy was talking about that is so sought after by interview panels. There's always some sort of policy paper. There will be the Harman report on bullying and discrimination at the bar. There will be all sorts of ethics guidance. That sort of thing. There will be the Young Barristers newsletter telling you what the young bar thinks are the main issues that it's facing at the moment. In a Temple newsletter, there will be practice-specific articles, and just without putting undue pressure on yourself, if you can take that on board and remember what I think Jamie, you were the one who said this earlier in terms of going deep into specific things you're interested in. That would always help. So I thought I would highlight those resources as a parting word.
Right. Thank you very much. I've got 3 minutes to make some closing remarks. I haven't thought a single second about what sort of closing remarks I'm going to make. So we're going to find out what's going to come out of my mouth right now. I hope you've all found that helpful. There are themes that come up time and time again on these sorts of panels that you will see on websites and other blogs and things that people have written, Twitter threads and so on about pupillage interviews. But there's always some individual questions that come up in a slightly different way or on a slightly different topic, and nothing that any of us have said should be taken as gospel in the sense that it will absolutely apply to every single set in every single situation. We've given some broad advice, but there are always exceptions, good and bad. We can really only give you the benefit of our experience, and ultimately, as I say, it's a difficult, grueling process. And the fact that we can't give you a set list of here is what you must do in order to get pupillage makes it more difficult, because it can feel sometimes that you're sort of moving through the dark and not quite understanding the direction of travel with this sort of thing. So hopefully the advice that we've given from the different positions that we can give advice from has provided you with some sort of insight that you can take away and apply to your interviews. But with 1 minute to go, the obvious thing to say is best of luck to you all. I hope nearly everyone, or indeed everyone, if it's possible, numerically gets a good deal of interviews, has a real crack at it, and hopefully a good number of you will get pupillage this time round. But if you don't, come back next year, get better, go again. Most candidates have to do that multiple times. So yes, best of luck.